Hello, Spark fans, and welcome back to Advancing Spark, where I'm doing the first of a kind of monthly roundup of news. So I've been covering Spark runtimes as they're released and kind of saying, hey, look, 8.1's here, and all of that kind of stuff. But actually, I don't really go into what's happening in the workspace, in the Databricks platform, mainly just the clusters. So what we're going to do, we now have a very helpful place where we can go to look and say, what are all the changes that have happened to the platform this month, including any actual release notes for the Databricks Spark clusters themselves. So we'll do a monthly roundup. So welcome to the March Databricks monthly roundup 2021. Yeah, let's see how it goes. As always, do not forget to like and subscribe. Let me know what you think of the new features going in. Are they useful? Are you going to use them? Any you're particularly excited about? Anything you were hoping you'd see that you didn't see? As always, let us know down in the comments. But otherwise, let's go and have a look. So there is this page. We have the platform release notes. Now beware, there are different versions of this page depending on whether you're on AWS, GCP, or Azure. So this is the Databricks, the Azure Databricks release notes, talking about what's happened in March 2021. And from now on, we'll just kind of do a regular monthly roundup of all the stuff that has happened. And it's been a fairly crazy month. Loads and loads of stuff in this list, some super interesting things. Some things we'll do demos of as separate videos. But otherwise, I just want to quickly run through this list and talk about the things that mean a lot to me. Firstly, there are three updates in terms of Databricks runtimes. So we had runtime 8.0 go GA. Now that caught me by surprise. I wasn't expecting it to go GA so quickly. And that is bringing an upgrade of the Python version, a move to Spark 3.1, loads and loads of things wrapped into that release. Lots of breaking changes in that release, and we talked about that last time. So that is GA. We saw the beta release of Databricks Runtime 8.1, which is cool. It has some features in there. We'll step into that. But that's also now gone GA as well. So we'll have a look at what features are now in production, and then you can go and use with your production code on top of Databricks Runtime 8.1. And you know what? Let's start there. Why not? Let's dive into 8.1 and have a look what's going on. So a few things in here. This is really annoying because this directly it improves something I did last week in a video that would have been fantastic to actually see. So we've got new SQL Operators that helps us query JSON. So you may have seen last week I was showing the new schema drift functionality when reading JSON inside of Autoloader. And it kind of just takes any extra columns, any extra data it wasn't expecting, and it just jams it into this unpassed data column. And then you can go and query it. But I was having trouble because it was using JSON tuple and trying to understand that, and it told me I couldn't unpack more than one thing from there at once. I had to Google around and remember the actual syntax for JSON tuple. And they said, hey, you know what? There's a far easier way of doing that. So new in 8.1, we can do two things. One, casting. Casting is now super easy. We can go just a double colon to say, take a column, cast it as a particular data type. Really easy, really simple. So rather than actually having to write cast in all our SQL, we've got a shortcut. Fine. Okay. Nice. Easy. This one is the one that would really, really have helped as I seen it last week. I actually saw it the evening that I put that video out. Always the way. In this case, we're taking our JSON column, we're doing two columns, and then we're extracting a value from it. Or no, single column. Two columns to cast, single column to dig in there. It's going to take a while to remember that. So we can say, I want the column, and I want to extract whatever particular thing I'm doing. So the example we've got is we've got raw, column store, price, which is pulling out different data that was held inside this bit of JSON, and we're going down exploring inside that particular column. So really, really cool. We can go and actually now use that to dig into some data, pull it out, and extract things. So super, super interesting. And I've actually got the demo I did last time. Did a load of things, autoloader, unpassed data, blah, 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 blah. And we ended up with this thing. So I had a select statement, doing a quick query, saying I want to do JSON tuple, I want to kind of do it on top of unpassed data column, and I want to pull out the weight column. And we got that, and it worked. I can go and dumpster dive inside this giant column and pull out weight, but it didn't let me do it twice. It was like, no, you can't do that. That's you can't have two exploding statements. So we can actually just really straight away go and use that new syntax to go and explore this. So we're replacing that. So I'm on an 8.1 cluster. So I'm on the new runtime that's now GA already. And I can just go and pull this apart and go, okay, I don't want it to be a JSON tuple command. I want to do single colon to go and explore inside it. I don't need string. So I can now just do that. So that's going to say inside that column, go and find this attribute. And again, that does have to be a string. So I'm going to go off, do that. And that should just work. Yep. Happy. There we go. I've got my weight column. It's gone and explored inside it. I can do the same. I think I also had size in there. So let's go and see what's in there. So I can do that same syntax as a second column. Call it size. Look inside there, see what I get. And it's pulling out. It's all the slash ends. It's not real data in there. It's got nulls if it doesn't find it. But you can just go and explore inside that JSON column. So actually, that suddenly makes that unpassed data column so much more useful. You can just, essentially, it's a slightly different syntax, but you can use dot notation over JSON that's been stored as a string and it hasn't been properly stored as a struct. That's all it is. And it's really cool and really easy. So that's one of the nice new features gone into 8.1. That's about it, but it's great. Okay, so other things that we can do. So it's easier to actually just bring back lists. So you can actually, so when you're actually saying show grants, you used to be able to kind of bring back lots of lists. We've now got some security over who can see who has access to different things. Some more autoloader options. So we can now change the fetch parallelism when it's talking to the queue service. To talk about, well, actually, how much data do we get at once? So if you've got a queue which is getting masses and masses of data in there, and you want a bit of control about how it's talking to it, we can now go and dig into that a little bit, which is cool. Talking to Synapse Analytics using a service principal. I mean, again, the more tightly knit we're able to actually integrate between Databricks and Synapse, actually, the better. You know, we don't want to be using SQL logins in this day and age. So really good that we're actually improving that. We're digging more into it and we're getting more abilities to actually properly connect into Synapse Analytics. So great news on there. Again, should be seamless. So service principal, great. Okay, so manually inserting identity columns. So that was one of the kind of the awkward things in terms of if you'd set up identities and then you were trying to get data into it by pushing it from Databricks using the Synapse Analytics connectors. It was always a little bit awkward. And you had to kind of just do it as separate steps or do it as kind of pre and post stuff. You can now turn identity insert on. Just go, yeah, I'm going to give you an explicit value for this. If you've got data coming from elsewhere, generate an identity. If I'm giving you data, I'm going to tell you what the identity should be. So that's really useful. Oh, I hadn't even seen that. So autoloader now allows you the same as kind of when we're talking about Synapse Analytics. We can now use a service principal to do queue operations. So previously we had to use a SAS key. We had to use like a big full blob SAS connection string and store that in a key vault or something like that, which is weird because we're also creating a service principal to be able to create those things and then giving it a different connection to actually read the thing it's just created, and it was fairly confused. So now the fact that we can actually use a service principal means we can have a single connection method using service principals and say, I want a service principal that has the ability to create new queues and the ability to query that queue, which just kind of makes sense. So as usual, there's then a load of different Python libraries. There's loads of updated R libraries. Some Spark bugs have been fixed in the core engine and all the usual stuff that I will leave you to look through. So 8.1, at first glance, it was like, oh, there's one or two little things. But actually, some of them are just so useful and so baked into a lot of the stuff that we do that, again, I immediately had use cases when I was like, wish I had seen that. So 8.1, really cool. And then there's all the other things that have happened in the Databricks platform over the past month. So one, I mean, it's not enabled on mine yet, but I'm very happy to see dark mode coming in. So if you want to use notebooks in dark mode rather than the sheer blinding whiteness of the normal Databricks IDE, you've got that. Now that's not rolled out for me yet. I can't actually show you it. So it has kind of a rolling out between essentially across this week. So at some point you'll find your Databricks workspace will just suddenly in your user settings have the option. You'll be like, boop, dark mode. It's nice. Okay, it's not life changing. One What might be life-changing in terms of cost is the spot VMs. So spot VMs, super, super useful. And that's when you want to essentially bid a low price on excess capacity for compute. So normal Databricks, I'm saying I need a VM that's this size and I will pay for it. And when I'm paying for it, I expect it to be there. No questions asked. Now with spot VMs, we're saying I don't want to pay full price. I want to run this. And you know what? It doesn't have to run immediately, or it doesn't actually have to use, essentially, if it happens to be a point in time when actually not that many people are using all the CPUs in your given Azure region, you can actually get them for cheap. So you configure your spot VM bid, essentially saying, I would like this type of VM, this CPU size, all that kind of stuff. I want to pay this amount. And if actually the current auction price for the spot one is lower than or equal to the bid price, you can actually get those VMs. Now, they might get evicted. You might lose them. So you might be using a spot cluster and occasionally just nodes of it will disappear as you lose you get evicted from that spot CPU. But it doesn't really matter because the Spark job will keep on running with the nodes that are left. It will allocate new nodes. And if you can't get any of your spot VMs, it'll allocate a normal full price VM. So if you want to run it, if you want to have jobs that run, that occasionally take a little bit longer because they're recycling nodes, because they're acquiring spot VMs and then losing it as demand goes up and the price goes up, and it's just replacing it. And that's fine because it's a maintenance job or it's a long running job and it's got lots of parallelism and it doesn't matter if clusters are coming in and out and you want it to be much cheaper. Spot VMs is how you do that. So really interesting idea, really clever all stuff from the, it's been around in Amazon for quite a while. But it's great in Azure to just say, you know what? They have all these CPUs. You might as well just make sure the CPUs are using their full capacity. And it's just a way to kind of just manage the ebb and flows, supply and demand, essentially, of the CPUs. So Spot VM is really, really interesting to just hammer down the cost that you're paying for it. Worst case, you pay the cost that you're currently paying anyway. It's not too bad. So super interesting. Definitely going to be taking a close look at those. I'll do a video about how to set up and how to set up bids and what it looks like at a later date. So other stuff. We've got a new jobs UI. So if you're in Databricks and you're trying to create a job, so you can go in here and you had create job, and it's all very manual. And now you've got this whole UI just to help you make it. And it's not crazy. It's fairly straightforward how we're actually doing it. What do I want to do? I want to do my autoloader notebook. Pulls it in. What cluster should it run on? Should it run on an existing cluster? All that kind of stuff. Any parameters that thing needs. I need to go and create all the widget parameters and all the inputs. What should happen on success and failure? All that kind of thing. Any alerts? Should it be just a one-off? Do I just want to run this as a one-off thing? Or do I want it scheduled? In which case I can use cron syntax and all the stuff that used to be in there. Essentially, they just made this UI much nicer to be able to work with a lot of this stuff. So be aware, you've now got this thing essentially just for configuring and playing with new jobs. You should see that rolled out now as well. Okay, so other bits. When running jobs, if you run jobs and it has to retry, you can actually sort of keep track of that because it'll have a sequential value based on each retry attempt. Super useful for context inside that notebook to know what iteration it's on. Number of saved jobs in premium workspaces. Again, kind of some people have been hitting limits. There's a few limits that have been lifted in March. So limit the number of saved jobs. So if you've got tons and tons of jobs, you can have more jobs now if you were hitting that limit. And then down at the bottom, we've got a number of terminated clusters. So how many clusters you can just have in an idling state, knocking around. But the number of pinned clusters in a workspace has gone up as well. So that's now up at 40. So it used to be the case where you could only have 20 clusters pinned. And if you had like more different people coming in with different configurations, then you wouldn't be able to pin them. And the big thing with the pin one is if you haven't used it for 30 days, it drops out. So if you've gone into Databricks and you've designed a cluster, you turn the cluster on, and then you turned it off and you've gone on holiday, and you come back, and then your cluster's not there anymore. It's just empty because it's timed down. And if you pin a cluster, it stops it from timing out. But you used to have hard limits on how many clusters you can have. So we've still got a limit, but it's been upped to 40. And the limit on how many clusters that I've turned off that are there before it starts complaining about things is now 100. So again, just generally upping those limits allowing you to have more clusters managed, more jobs saved, more clusters pinned so you can keep track of stuff. Just interesting things happening on. In terms of BI tools, so generally that's just information really. So if you were trying to connect to a Databricks cluster or SQL Analytics through Tableau, through Power BI, if you're trying to go through Excel, you need to actually be able to get to the various drivers. So like the ODBC driver, you've got the Simba ODBC driver, which you need to have installed locally if you want to try and query a Databricks cluster through Excel. And now it's just got a nicer landing page. You can still get this thing. It's not a new driver, but essentially they've made the path to find these drivers easier, and they've made it better to update. So you can actually just make it easier to get hold of the drivers as they improve them and as they put more stuff in. So if you are using the JDBC or ODBC drivers to connect to Databricks, you can use that. Doesn't really change things like the Power BI connector and all that kind of stuff. That's a separate thing that's in the Power BI service, and they update that separately. So it's only if you've manually downloaded one of those drivers in order to connect that you're going to need this stuff. But at least it's nice, it's easier, you can use it slightly better. Okay, Git repos, we had a look at that in the last video. Again, so much better. Really, really happy that they've got that in, which is great. Things like automatic retries. I've not actually had a look at what this one is. Okay, so there's a rollback of some functionality. So a job cluster retry forced it to do a retry. They've rolled that back. Don't know too much about what's in there. Tableau Desktop now supports Active Directory integration, which is huge. So certainly I had a client who were trying desperately to get it to work, but previously you had to use a PAT token. So you had to use your personal access token, go into Databricks, create a token, get that one-off token, plug that into Tableau in order to sign in as yourself. And that just feels like too many steps. To have a user have to go into the Databricks workspace at all in order to get their BI tool to connect to it, it just shouldn't need to. You should be able to give them the connection and say, log in as yourself, and you'll see what tables we provided to you. And you can now do that. So that's just much, much easier, nicer. Something just kind of fits together better. Okay, so I've not had a look at the ML Flow updates. Where do we go? Where's that one? Was that over there? So what did we have there? Okay, so you can now query text-based models with a serving UI. So it was previously only allowing you to have the pandas data frames. So if you essentially, it just cut off a whole slew of model types. And the more models this can serve, the more we can actually use it as a more fully fledged model serving repo. So again, it's good to see kind of ML Flow just maturing and getting more functionality and just not saying you're only allowed to serve models of this type. The more we add into that, again, the better we can use it. And again, we've now got the ability to search models. So if you've got tons and tons of totals models in your registry, you want to be able to find them using tags. So it just kind of makes sense, kind of improving the functionality of that. So loads and loads and loads and loads and loads of stuff in there this month. Again, lots and lots of things, just general usability. Great to see just the fast cadence of how quickly we're seeing new releases of the Databricks runtime. So really, really good stuff. So that is my lightning fast rattle through all of the various different features that we've got. Some of them I need to dig into and have a play with and experiment more. Some of them already using in anger, especially repos. Thank you. And just the fact that we can do that searching within that JSON string. It kind of looks, kind of as I was saying, kind of last week, looking at the schema drift inside autoloader. If that becomes a general pattern, so not just through autoloader and not only through JSON, but anytime we're dealing with any kind of schema on read kind of file, if we can give an expectation of what we want that file to look like, and then have anything that falls outside of those expectations to go into that unpassed data column, that is then very, very easy to query. That answers a whole load of problems about how we manage schema drift. So rather than just having the complete wild west of our tables that are constantly in flux, and rather than having really, really fixed tables that don't change and therefore we lose a lot of the benefits of having a lake at all, having these tables that allow flexible columns that can adjust and can flex and can have extra stuff in there, but be queried easily is huge. And that's a big, big step forward. I was a little bit disappointed with the unpassed data about how we could interact that. That just solves the problem, makes it much easier, and it's already GA. So huge things, loads of useful stuff in there. Hopefully that is all very useful. As always, do not forget to like and subscribe. Let me know if you've got any comments. I'll drop the link to the platform release notes down in the description. And otherwise, I'll see you next time. Cheers.